The K9 barked like he'd spotted a bomb, loud, fierce, unrelenting at a hospital security guard. Everyone froze. No one understood why. What the dog sensed wasn't visible to anyone, and what he stopped that day left officers and the entire hospital in stunned silence. The hospital was calm that afternoon. Everything was routine. Officer Ben, a hospital security guard, stood casually near the ICU, sipping coffee, while a K9 unit named Shadow patrolled with his handler just a few yards away. Shadow, a well-trained German shepherd, had always been calm in crowds, but then, without warning, his ears shot up. He growled low. Within seconds, he barked. Once, sharp and commanding, his eyes locked on Officer Ben. The sound echoed down the corridor, freezing everyone mid-step. Conversations stopped. The air turned electric. Ben turned, confused. "What's his problem?" he muttered with a forced chuckle, raising both hands. But Shadow didn't back down. He barked again, louder, more urgent. Nurses stepped away cautiously. A doctor peeked out of a nearby room, startled. Shadow lunged forward slightly, his handler tugging the leash to stop him. The dog's entire focus was on Ben, and it wasn't aggression, it was warning. Something about Ben had triggered a deeply trained instinct, but no one, not even the handler, understood what. Yet. What started as a normal shift had just turned into something else entirely, and the K9 wasn't letting it go. The hallway was frozen in disbelief. Nurses exchanged confused glances, unsure whether to intervene or back away. A few patients peeked out from their rooms, watching the commotion unfold. Officer Ben stood there, visibly uneasy now, as Shadow continued barking, his stance tense, teeth bared, eyes fixed. "Call him off!" Ben snapped, trying to mask the rising panic in his voice. But Shadow wasn't responding to panic. He was responding to something deeper, something no one else could sense. The handler tightened his grip on the leash. "Shadow, heel!" he commanded, but the dog refused. Instead, he lowered his body and growled again, inching forward, guarding the space between Ben and the rest of the hallway. A nurse stepped back, knocking over a tray. Metal clattered against tile, but the dog didn't flinch. The atmosphere thickened like a storm about to break. Everyone waited for someone to explain what the dog had just detected, but no one could. The handler, Officer Ray, stepped in front of Shadow, trying to calm him. "Easy, boy. What's going on?" he said under his breath, kneeling to meet the dog's eyes. But Shadow wasn't having it. He growled again, low, insistent, almost vibrating with intensity. Ray had worked with him for over 3 years and had never seen this level of urgency. The dog wasn't just barking at a person, he was alerting. Trained to sense danger, illness, or hidden threats, Shadow had locked onto something Ray couldn't see. Ben's face had gone pale. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, taking a slow step back. Shadow barked again, louder. His muscles coiled like a spring, but he didn't lunge. He guarded. Ray looked up sharply. "Something's wrong," he said to a nearby nurse. "He's not attacking, he's sensing." Everyone froze again. This wasn't a behavioral issue. Shadow was reading something in Ben, something buried deeper than anyone realized, and he wasn't letting it go unnoticed. Within minutes, hospital security radioed local police for backup. Officers arrived quickly, moving down the corridor with cautious precision. "What's the situation?" one of them asked, eyeing Shadow, still fixed on Officer Ben. "He won't stop barking at him," Ray said. "We think it's an alert." The officers looked at each other, tension climbing. One gave a nod. "Let's clear the area." Nurses helped escort nearby patients away as police began a careful sweep of the hallway, checking for anything suspicious. They searched equipment closets, electrical panels, nearby bags, nothing unusual, but Shadow never shifted focus. He didn't even glance at the other rooms. His nose was aimed directly at Ben. One officer stepped closer. "Let's check him," he said quietly. "Just to be sure." Ben scoffed. "Are you serious?" But sweat was now visible on his forehead, and his hands were shaking. Shadow barked again, sharp, piercing, final. Whatever was wrong, it was in him. The officers approached Ben slowly, trying to keep the situation calm. "We just want to make sure everything's okay," one said, extending a hand. Ben backed away slightly, then held out his arms. "Fine, check me. I've got nothing to hide," he muttered. They began a quick inspection, radio, badge, vest, all standard. But as one officer gently patted his side, Ben winced. "What's that?" the officer asked, pointing to a bulge beneath his uniform shirt. Ben froze. "Old injury," he mumbled, but his voice cracked. Ray knelt beside Shadow, watching closely. The dog's tail was stiff, his breathing shallow. He barked again, one short, intense burst, his body leaning forward like a coiled spring. The officers exchanged a glance. "We need a medic," one said. "Now!" Ben started to protest, but the pain hit him hard. He clutched his side and staggered. Whatever Shadow had detected wasn't just suspicion. It was something inside Ben, and it was getting worse by the second. Ben collapsed to his knees, clutching his side as a wave of pain washed over him. The officers caught him just in time, lowering him to the floor. A medic team arrived within minutes and began examining him. "He's burning up," one said, checking his pulse. Another carefully lifted his shirt, revealing severe abdominal swelling. "This isn't an injury," the medic said grimly. "It's internal, possibly a ruptured appendix or bleeding. He needs emergency surgery now." Gasps filled the hallway. The barking hadn't been aggression, it was alarm. The police, stunned, stepped back as the medics wheeled Ben onto a stretcher. He looked up at Ray and Shadow, eyes wide with disbelief. How did he know?" he whispered. Ray didn't answer. He didn't need to. Shadow had sensed it. Before the fever, before the collapse, before the pain had even registered, he knew. The dog hadn't been stopping a threat. He had been trying to save a life. Ray rested a hand on his back. "You did good, boy," he whispered. Staff who once looked on with fear now stood with reverence. What they had witnessed wasn't just instinct, it was precision. Shadow had barked before the man even knew he was dying, and now that warning might be the reason he lived. Inside the operating room, the situation was critical. Ben's appendix had ruptured and infection had already begun to spread. But thanks to the early response, the doctors had time. Barely. Nurses worked quickly, and surgeons moved with urgency. Every decision now hinged on minutes, yet no one could shake what had happened in the hallway. A dog had seen it coming, when no human had. And that moment changed everything. As news of the incident spread, officers and hospital staff stood around in disbelief. "I've seen K9S detect drugs, even explosives," one officer said, shaking his head. "But this was something else." The entire event had been captured on hospital security cameras, from the first bark to Ben's collapse. Doctors later confirmed that without immediate intervention, Ben would have gone into septic shock. "He had no idea," one medic said. "No symptoms, no warning, except the dog." The hallway that once buzzed with confusion was now filled with quiet respect. Shadow had saved a life, and stunned an entire police unit doing it.